Hey guys, and welcome back to Figuring Things Out. Quite a nice and simple video today. Basically, on my email list, I put out a celebration that we finally hit 5,000 subs. So amazing. Thank you if you're one of those people. Basically, I put out a simple question. If you'd like to ask me a question, I will do my best to answer it in this very video. So we have, I think, 8 questions to go over today, and I'll do my best to answer them in as much detail as I see fit. Please feel free to follow up in the comments. Make sure you're subscribing. And of course, if you'd like to keep up behind the scenes and get some discounts and some other behind the scenes type things, please feel free to click the link for my newsletter down below. So without further ado, let's move to the first question. And I haven't planned any answers here, so they're going to be quite open. The first question is a big classic. What is your why, Will? So very much a classic. Something that I think is very important to say is that I don't always tend to look for a why. A lot of the times I see people's whys changing and they're very volatile over the course of a training period, simply because the why is intertwined with an emotional response. And as we're all aware, emotions come and go like night and day, like the rain, so on and so forth. Without trying to be too philosophical, therefore, I try to look towards the how, and just if I'm, how something's making me feel, how I'm going to attack it, and how I'm going about doing the progression cycle. This is really the key for me. And so long as I'm diving into something and it's making me feel interested, engaged, joyous, whatever that may be, that's fine for me. And I really love to have a modular type practice where I'm just diving into an interest for a certain period of time. How long that may be, I don't really mind. It could be 6 months, it could be 3 months, it could be 3 years. I don't have any long-term planning on what I should be doing. I try to avoid a certain should, and just kind of habitualize my practice into my life. I'm just really rooted in the need and the desire to move and to push myself into different areas and just follow the passions that come. And that's really what I'm doing with students as well. I'm just trying to push them towards their own interests and just guide them and support them along the way. They're the ones that are directing the process. I'm simply a guide on the side. So not the best answer to my why. If I could give something, like a suggestion towards my why, it would be, especially in my work, a love of helping people, a love of diving in and supporting others. I'm very much a people person. I'm very much a supporter of other people. So I enjoy doing that, and to be blessed with that as my job, then that's a double win. So next one, you talk a lot about physical intelligence rather than just getting strong or learning skills. What's the actual difference, and why does that distinction matter for how people train? Good question. Maybe it's semantic, but for me it's very important because the physical intelligence idea holds a higher position than any given individual skill. It's more of a feeling of adaptability and evolution in my own physicality. If we talk about intelligence as the ability to hold 2 or more opposing ideas at any one time and still function normally, this speaks to me very strongly, not only on a mental or cognitive level, but very much so on a physical level. And so I always want to try and hold some sense of adaptability in my practice, even if I am diving into something very specific, such as arm wrestling right now. It's very much not a broad scope discipline. It's a very narrow niche discipline, alternative discipline maybe. And so I do have one eye always on my general training to ensure that I'm having a bit more of a broader base, both for longevity, interest, and just because I like to have an adaptable process. What I mean by it holds a higher place, a higher hierarchy than any individual skill. No one independent skill or thing that I'm doing is ever the ultimate. When I learned to do a one-arm handstand or a one-arm chin-up or any of those kind of isolated skills that are quite high level, I never got to a better place. It's only the sum of all the parts that are greater or what kind of speaks volumes. And I think for me, that's really important. I'm not judging myself or my training on any one thing that I might achieve or do. It's just a constant journey of figuring things out. And that's kind of why I call the company and the brand Figuring Things Out. It's just an iterative process, an evolving process that speaks to me on a philosophical level, on a training level, on a life level, so on and so forth. Question 3. Trying to understanding what someone actually needs, then helping them get there. It sounds easy, but I know it's not. What is one thing that you had to learn in order to make this effective and sustainable? What makes it so important? Understanding what someone actually needs, or then helping them get there. Interesting. So what comes to mind is a quote: "You can walk a horse to water, but you can't drink the water for it." I think maybe speaks volumes here. And also I love the idea of being someone who teaches not from, the sage on the stage, but really the guide on the side. And so for me, when I think about trying to really help someone, I'm not necessarily just giving all the answers. I'm not a teacher or a coach who's spoon feeding students and clients. I'm really trying to work with them to allow them to figure out their own process and figure out their own strengths, weaknesses, and ways of learning. There's a multitude of different ways in which we can learn and fail. And they're very much intertwined. If you don't fail, you cannot learn. And so opening up space for people to actually engage in that process is for me kind of a priority. Of course, if someone's struggling and failing and they need extra support, then I'm there. And I'm very much wanting to speak on the human level, but sometimes I do encourage a slight sufferance or a bit of kind of extra dedication in order to achieve something, because at the end of the day, that's what's making things extra meaningful. If it's a swift process to achieve something, there's less meaning derived from that process. Whereas if you really have to work and strive to achieve whatever it is you're achieving, no matter how small, it adds just that little bit more meaning and therefore pride or glory when one does achieve the given thing. I made a video years ago called "The Thing is Bigger Than the Thing," and it kind of speaks to this. It essentially means no matter how small the thing you're doing, there's still depth of emotional connection or maybe fear or frustration, or, there's a human level below the external thing that you're doing. A handstand, for example, is the biggest achievement ever for some people, and it's just a small step for some. And it's not the thing that's relevant, it's the underneath that's important. If you've strived for 10 years and struggled through a handstand and finally achieved it, and there's a child in gymnastics that got it on their first day, for the latter, it's meaningless. But for the person who strove for 10 years, it's really something. And that's important. If someone could only focus on one thing for the next 6 months to build the best foundation for long-term movement practice, what would you tell them to prioritize and why? Big one. I think it's funny how you come back in circles, but something I've been doing in my own practice lately, because I'm hyper-specialized in the arm wrestling for the time being, my general practice is focused on, we could say, kind of 6 fundamental movements and some additional accessory work alongside that. And what I'm trying to do is build and sustain or maintain, let's say, a broad general base of capacity, strength, mobility, and just health for longevity, and then specialize on top of that. And so what I'm doing is splitting my work up into kind of 6 fundamental ranges of motion or movement patterns. So that's some type of loaded squatting variation where I'm using as much range of motion as possible. a loaded hinging variation. So again, using as much range of motion as possible, lifting things from the floor essentially. I then have a vertical pulling and a vertical pushing variation, and then a horizontal push and a horizontal pulling variation. And this kind of ticks more or less any of the key movement patterns in the body, and keeps me moving in a way that feels healthy and sustainable. And then I add various accessory movements onto my sessions. It might be some grip strength, it might be some kind of cardiovascular conditioning, it might be some rotation for my torso, and then of course the more large frame mobility skills in arching and inflection, and then for the hips. All of this just kind of ticking over, nothing too strenuous, nothing too major, just making sure I have, again, as big of a broad of a base as possible in order to specialize as well as I possibly can. Of course, whenever you're diving into a specific realm, there's always going to be small niggles and specific adaptations that you need to get used to. So of course, in the general practice, there is also some kind of rehabilitation process there. Right now, it's definitely elbows, wrists, getting used to the arm wrestling work and the specific demands there. It takes time not only in that specific practice, but also then in the general practice. And that's really how I build. So if you could focus on only one thing, I would say your general practice. Spend 6 months, get as strong as possible on a general level, build the base of your pyramid as broad as it possibly can be, because then you can specialize at a much higher level. If you don't have the breadth at the base, the peak of the tower is never going to be as stable or as high. And that's a kind of principle that I think stands. I've really found it in my own career, my own training, and my own teaching. The broader the base we can build for someone on a more general level, the easier it is to specialize moving forward. It might mean not jumping to a specific skill or fun way of training as soon as you'd like to, but it will then cut that process much shorter, and also most likely give you less risk of injury, overuse, so on and so forth. I have recently actually created what I call the program, which is essentially a very affordable monthly training plan that I use as a general guide for my own practice, and then you can grade it beginner, intermediate, and advanced. It's on my coaching app, and it's basically there to try help more people. Obviously, I have a limited amount of spots for one-to-one online coaching, so the program is an attempt to help more people that either can't afford the one-to-one coaching or just simply want a guide that's well thought out and well programmed. Essentially, without going into too much detail, you get a new program every 4 weeks. I'm going to upload one every single month. And yeah, super cheap, super affordable, super high quality. All my tutorials are in there, all the reps and sets are provided, and you even get a community along with that. So if it's something that you might be interested in, I'll put a link down below. Anyway, moving on. What's something you're currently working on in your own practice that's humbling you right now? What's the lesson you're learning from struggling with it? Well, let's stick with the arm wrestling theme. Something I'm struggling with is an injury I picked up from the competition I recently came third in, the nationals, the novice nationals. And I picked up an injury in my right forearm flexor, which initially I thought was just a stress response. So like a kind of deep DOMS, you could say. And over the course of the last month, I realized that it's sustained and it's actually quite acute. And I get like a hot, burning sensation when I do certain movements. And I've been really trying to rehab that. But it's not as simple as I hoped. I'm working through it. And something that I'm learning, which I think is incredibly important to share, and it's something that I've learned a lot through my various injuries in the past, from my knee, from my shoulder, from my back, from my neck, multiple wrist injuries, hand injuries from climbing, so on and so forth, ankles. The key principle to moving through an injury is, it's quite a hard fact and quite a hard truth, but I think it's accurate. What hurt you is likely also to heal you. And what's important to understand is that you don't want to do the same stupid thing again, but you do want to move through the same range of motion and do the same-ish movement that hurt you in order to understand where you're weak and where you can actually then learn to get stronger. So for example, if I injured my elbow in a certain range of motion doing a certain movement, I can grade that intensity right down and do loads and loads of reps in a certain low intensity range of motion, almost the same movement pattern, and therefore learn and reintegrate that into my body and not have a fear response like, oh, I need to avoid this. Quite the contrary, I'm slowly going to gain confidence in order to move through that range and gain strength, and then also open it and own it longer term. And I think that's always served me really well whenever I had a back injury, rather than I had in 2021, I had a sustained back injury for almost a year, 6 months of kind of debilitating pain, and then 6 months of kind of rehab process. And the major thing that supported me after the acute phase of pain was actually doing things like deadlifts and the movement patterns under load that I was really afraid to do. And once I got over the emotional fear and negativity surrounding that, and kind of iterated the volume and the rep ranges and intensities that worked for my body, and specific movement patterns as well, I really was able to move past the back injury being any type of hindrance for me. And now, touch wood, I have no symptoms. Moving on. How much does your coaching cost? Very simply, I have 2 levels of one-to-one coaching. I recently had to increase the prices because we were full. Basically, it's $300 per month, or I offer a deal because I want people to engage in a longer process. If it's 6 months of coaching we commit to, which it is initially, you can pay 6 months up front for $1,500 and therefore get 1 month for free. Now, I'm always having conversations with students, especially those that are studying, or if they're not working at the current time. I do offer discounts and specific context for different people. So, I'm only human. I'm always going to try and help people. I hate to have money as a barrier, but that's the level of engagement you're kind of expecting. Simple one there. You've built your business around YouTube, one-to-one coaching, and now the program, but you avoid typical fitness marketing tactics. How do you think growing the business without feeling like you're selling out or becoming another fitness group? How do you think about growing the business without feeling like you're selling out or becoming another fitness guru? When it comes to the mentorship course, one of the words I repeat over and over and over again in all of my lectures is resonance. And basically what I say to all the coaches that I'm coaching is that you need to resonate with the audience. And so what I really try and do is speak from a place of experience, I speak from a place of truth, what I've personally experienced, and just try to relay that through given channels. And now, recently I've started sharing more long form on YouTube and previously on the podcast. Initially, for many years, I was sharing on Instagram, and it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized that game that the algorithm demands on Instagram didn't really suit me, my style, and the type of people that I'm trying to work with. Whereas on YouTube, maybe speaking to you right now if you're watching this, a longer format, kind of more nuanced opinion and perspective is maybe more relevant to figuring things out and the people that I want to work with. So that might be you. When it comes to feeling like you're selling out, I think it's a bit more tricky because that's subjective. People have different views on this. I don't quite have a concrete answer here. I do work with a couple of companies and brands that I think are very respectful, interesting, brands that I use personally and want to further on to the people that I'm engaged with. So I have a couple of brands that I have an affiliation with, let's say. But overall, I'm just trying to see my work as both a passion project and also a business. But it kind of has to be built on a business, because the passion project doesn't grow, doesn't sustain if the business fails. So I have to merge these two worlds, and I have to understand that business has to take a precedent. I have to make it financially viable to be having a roof over my head, for example. So all of this, even what I'm doing right now, to be honest, is an advertisement. You know, I'm trying to draw people to the business, very simply. And I hope through doing these types of videos, I allow a resonance, I allow a humanness to the juggernaut of online advertisements. I'm not here trying to throw fake news in your face. It's just an honest representation of what I feel, what I think, what I do, and trying to educate in a certain way. I believe this is the final question. Yes, the final question is, what is the mistake that you would encourage yourself to repeat, given the value of the learnings and the impact it had on your evolution? Ooh, great question to finish. What is the mistake that you would encourage yourself to repeat? It's hard to say that it's a mistake, but it's definitely something that I try to repeat, and that is to chase a goal and give up on it. And I think this is relevant because if I give the example of the one-arm handstand, it was a huge goal that I was chasing for many years, and I eventually achieved a kind of baby step towards it. I had a kind of 10-second one-arm handstand, which is nothing in the grand scheme of the skill. But for an innocent bystander, that's pretty cool. And for me, it was pretty cool. But in getting there, I had to give up so much else in my life. I ended up giving it up, and giving up handstands completely for a number of years. I've only recently in the last year started to practice handstands again because I was so overwhelmingly bored and done with the handstands because of the amount of time I was putting into this specific skill. But I would never say that that was a bad choice to chase the skill. It simply gave me a new perspective of allowing myself to give up on something, and that being a positive step rather than a negative step. And this has really served me well in stepping away from other things in my life that I once thought were huge, important goals, and actually not fulfilling them was the best thing to do. So it doesn't quite answer the question, doesn't fit perfectly. It's a bit of a square peg in a round hole here, but I would encourage you and myself to repeat the act of seeking something and giving up on it once I find out that it's not for me. And so, again, it's not a mistake, but it's something that I think is important to repeat. And because of the negative connotation of kind of giving up on something, I think it kind of works here. Can I think of anything else? People see failure as a mistake, but actually failure is the exact thing you need in order to learn. Like, genuinely, to signify neurologically what you want to learn, you first have to fail so that your system knows how important it is for you to achieve. It knows where your starting point is. It knows where you're going wrong in order for you to then move forward. Without these important kind of negative data points, you can't improve on those data points and move forward. So failure is also a mistake that you really must repeat. It's the only baseline to learning is failure. So it's something I really struggled with when I initially moved towards more skill-based training. But it's incredibly important. That's probably it. I think that's enough for today. Feel free to drop any questions, comments down below. A very simple one today. Nothing too fancy. Again, thank you so much for 5K subs. That's amazing. We move on now to 10K. So if each of you has one friend that you think might enjoy this, please share it. Ask them to subscribe. And all of a sudden we have 10,000 people. That would be amazing. As I said, I will link the 2 links down below. Otherwise, thank you and keep figuring things out.